Hi there. Welcome to Bourbon Turntable. We are the show that blends the love of music with the love of whiskey. With me tonight, as always, my good friend Drew Crawley. Drew, how are you, sir?
Howdy, I'm doing good. It's been a wonderful weekend or for me, of drinking whiskey and seeing live music and playing live music. So I'm about as happy as I get.
Well, yeah, could you? I think you played somewhere Friday night. That was kind of an
Yep,
impromptu thing.
yep. I had a buddy that got sick, so went and played a couple hours for him,
Yeah,
which never upset about little extra money these
yeah,
days. But then last night, Kate and I went and saw Jack Van Cleef and Noah Kahn at
yeah.
Paris Town Hall. So
Awesome.
very, very good show. And
Yeah,
a lot of good songwriters on that bill last night. So
yeah.
I was really
Good.
impressed with that. I think I was the oldest person in the room by like maybe 15 years.
Now
Both
you
those
know how
guys are,
I feel.
yeah,
Yeah,
it
you're
was
in
still
good
fun.
company, Kevin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we went Friday night. We went to see Dirty Streets, and opening for them was Feral Vices, who I believe you're friends with the guys in the band.
Yep, just
And
the drummer, but
yeah,
yes,
yeah. And the funny thing was they started playing, and my wife Cindy's with me, and their Feral Vices was pretty hardcore. It's pretty metal.
yes.
And I just kind of looked at her and I said, okay, the next band won't be like this. And she said, it's okay. I can see that that they have talent. And okay, well, good. That is about as good a compliment as my wife is ever going to give a metal band. So, but Dirty Streets were fantastic. If you've not caught their stuff, you should check them out. They're really good, and they'll actually be opening for our friends the Cold Stairs at their album release party down in Nashville on March 10th. So
Very
be
cool.
ready to check that out. Hey, we've got Tyler Mirt with us today, and we're going to get into some really good conversation with Tyler about whiskey, maybe a little bit about wine, and definitely a little bit about music. But before we do that, we want to tell you about the Bar Cart Co-op. Bar Cart is a collection of friends that bring to you content about the bourbon industry. Distillers Talk. Christy Atkinson and Alan Bishop, they are bringing the show to you. They talk with distillers from across the country, around the world. And if you ever wanted to really geek out on anything distillation, that is a show for you. It's a lot of fun. It's way over my head most of the time, but I still get a lot out of it because I want to know, I want to understand better what it took to get what's in that bottle, what's in my glass made and made the way it was. Alan also has a show called One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute, where you just email Alan questions about anything distillation, and he'll post video responses to that. And again, this is another whiskey geek kind of thing. But even as a novice as myself, I always learn a lot and always enjoy it. And Alan's always a lot of fun. My Whiskey Den shows every Monday night with Pat and Mike. It is where craft whiskey is king. They always have some good guests. It's a fun time in the chat with the people. They have some really great followers, and you'll always enjoy that. And of course, Bourbon Turntable. You're here, you're watching us. While you're doing it, hit that subscribe button so you do not miss out on future shows. And we have one more message for you.
All right, don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, hit the bell notification to find out when new episodes come out, which is every Wednesdays on all of your streaming services everywhere, Apple, Spotify, whatever other ones there are, and the YouTube where you can watch the live recording itself.
Thanks, Mike. We always appreciate you lending us your substantial talents. So, without further ado, let's bring Tyler Mirt in to Bourbon Turntable. Tyler, welcome to the show, buddy.
Hey guys, thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Good to reconnect.
Yeah. So, first, tell people what you're doing now, what your role is at Old Forester Brown-Forman.
Sure, my role has continued to evolve, especially recently. I am now the distillery ambassador for Woodford Reserve, Old Forester, as well as our Brown-Forman cooperage. So my focus is brand advocacy and education with our internal employees at Brown-Forman, our trade partners, distributors, and brokerages, as well as on and off premise retailers.
Mm-hmm.
So the majority of my week is bouncing between Woodford, Old Forester, and the cooperage, and doing deep dives into everything that we do at Brown-Forman to make these wonderful bourbons.
That's very
It's a
good.
tough gig.
Yeah.
Busy guy. Yeah.
Yeah, busy, but yes, yeah.
I'm thinking you're got to be on the road a good bit because you're physically going from place to place, right?
Yeah. I'm trying to talk him into the Brown-Forman helicopter to, just haven't gotten that pushed through the CapEx budget yet.
Well, you just keep trying, dare to dream, right? Go ahead and get that. Go ahead and get your helicopter license, and plant that seed.
Right.
So, how long have you been with the company, with Old Forester and Brown-Forman?
I jumped on really as soon as it opened. I think I came on a month after Old Forester opened. I sommelier in my past life, ran big box retail for a number of years. I was actually the wine director for Liquor Barn the first 18 months or so that we moved to Kentucky.
Oh, wow.
But, you moved to Kentucky, wine just isn't where the action is. So I had been trying to get my foot indoors at distilleries, and we lived downtown at the time. And as soon as Old Forester opened, I'd had my eye on that building since we knew we were moving to Louisville in like 2015, since I even heard the news about the release and was reaching out to people like Chris Morris and whatnot. Of course, it got delayed a year with a fire.
Right.
But just decided, if we're going to be here, just take the plunge, get my foot in the door. And luckily it all worked out. So I've been with Brown-Forman ever since 2018.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Now, is that where you two met?
Yes. Yeah, we met as part of that whole thing. And then found out, Tyler's also spent some time in Oklahoma as well. So we had a lot of nerding out to do about Oklahoma sports and all the craziness from there. And then, wine and beer from our past lives as well. So it's fun. We were fast friends pretty much from day one, I think.
Kindred spirits from the beginning.
So when you got on with Old Forester initially, what was your role at that point?
Man, I took a tour guide position.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the big risk of, back in those days. Now we're begging for people, but you could not get on at a distillery to save your life.
Yeah.
So I took about a 70% pay cut and just to get my foot in the door of the bourbon industry, but luckily it all worked out. So,
yeah. Okay. So before you got into the bourbon industry, you mentioned that you were working in wine. So tell us a little bit about your wine background as well.
Yeah, that was my first love, my intro into the industry. I had a great mentor by the name of James Andrews, who mentored under one of the most accomplished and knowledgeable individuals on the planet by the name of Doug Frost. He was a master of wine, master sommelier, and I had the privilege of mentoring under him, and got my sommelier certification in 2008, ran a couple beverage programs, but didn't like the restaurant business. So I transferred into big box retail. And, coming up, my mentor and I, he would do a lot of wine classes, kind of trained me how to do those. And once I got on the retail side, we opened a large new store in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and started doing wine classes. But there was a lot of transition at that period. That's when the craft beer boom really took off. So all of a sudden people wanted beer classes, and Scotch was already hot. So, why not do a Scotch class? Then bourbon starts to really blow up. And so I very much kind of, plan A, the initial plan was just sommelier, and then I just kind of Forrest Gumped my way into this whole, if I'm going to do classes on beer, get certified as a Cicerone. If I'm going to do classes on bourbon, get as much knowledge as I can there. Scotch, sake, tequila, whatever the case may be. So I ended up broadening my horizons considerably from wine. And luckily it all translates. Fermentation is fermentation, whether it's grape juice or corn, whatever the case may be. So very fortunate. I was also fortunate to be on the barrel selection team for the Oklahoma market when I was running this big box retail store. So there was a group of 8 to 10 of us that would come out once or twice a year, do barrel selections at all the distilleries.
Right.
And, we got to know that we loved it out here in Kentucky. It was about the same size of a city, but you've got bourbon, you've got horses, great food scene.
Yeah.
And as it turned out, our families ended up 2 hours north or south in Nashville and Indianapolis. So in 2016, we just took the plunge, moved out here blindly, no jobs. Our house sold in like 9 days. So it was like, all right, I guess we're going. But yeah, like I said earlier, luckily it all worked out.
Yeah. I love it when a plan comes together, right?
Or lack thereof.
Yeah. I mean this as a compliment, but Tyler is one of the biggest nerds I know when it comes to the business and the process of creating, spirits and fermented beverages. He's just an incredible source of knowledge. Obviously, you can tell, but he's had his hands in every part of this industry, from the retail side to the restaurant and the hospitality side to the production side. Now kind of doing the hospitality and education side. He's just an incredible resource for the team there. And I've benefited tremendously from talking to him and asking him all my nerd questions that nobody else knows the answer to. Tyler knows.
Yeah. So
and likewise, Drew's one of the best guys to banter back and forth with and geek out when no one else wants to listen to you.
Well, you've got to know who your audience is, or you got to know what kind of friend you've got, because some you start, digging into fermentation issues or mash bill issues, and their eyes just glaze over, and is it Weller? And then that's kind of the end of the conversation. But
I know that all too well. My biggest challenge is, especially first timers to Kentucky, it's like Candyland, and they go out the night before, and I have them at 8:30 in the morning, and they're looking at me like, just shoot me instead of talk to me about bourbon and education.
Right. But to that point, when you have people that are coming in from, Texas or Chicago or wherever, they're usually not just coming to go visit you at Old Forester. They're going to see you. They're going down to Heaven Hill. They may go down to Kentucky Peerless and see our friend John. They may go to Four Roses or Wild Turkey or wherever. So there's a lot that as an individual, as a tourist, they're cramming a lot of whiskey into probably a 2 or 3 day period. What do you do, or how do you present Old Forester or Brown-Forman in a way that will make it stand out in that journey that they're on?
That's a great question. And my focus is mainly on the trade side, but in doing, training with our own employees of how to tell the Old Forester story in particular, we're very fortunate in that there's no Kool-Aid to sell, right? It's got this incredibly rich history, 14 innovations that were first to market and changed the whole bourbon landscape. The claim to fame is the first bottle bourbon, but there's so many different layers to that, having been around 153 years. So we're very fortunate in that, the story is there. The history is there. Old Forester was a brand that flew under the radar for a long, long time since bourbon's decline back in the 70s. You're talking about a brand that was 1 million cases just south of what Woodford Reserve is today. in 1970 fell to something like 93,000 cases. And just last year we did over 400,000, could have done 500,000.
Wow.
So expected to be one of those very rare brands that no matter what you sell, if you used to sell 1 million cases of microphones, you fall to less than 100,000, and then to rebound all the way to 1 million is very hard to do.
Yeah.
And that's testament to the advantage of having this building, to these podcasts and all the bourbon groups getting behind the quality of Old Forester. And then with Woodford, it's the art, right? It's the marriage of craft and art, pot still distillation, as well as history, lower barrel entry proofs, extended fermentations, heat cycled warehousing in this historic setting. So at least with and then, the cooperage is historic as well. So I'm very fortunate. I think, anyone telling the Brown-Forman story is very fortunate in that we have all that to kind of, guide us, and you don't have to ad lib or make anything up. We're trying as hard as we can to fit the stories of Woodford Reserve, Old Forester, our cooperage into an hour or an hour and a half.
Right.
So it's always an exciting story to tell. It truly never gets old. Sharing those stories, watching the light bulbs go off in people's heads, or watching their amazement. Even if you don't like bourbon, any of the distilleries around Kentucky have their own rich history and rich story. So if you're a fan of history, a fan of Americana, bourbon, whatever it may be, it's a great time to visit and see all these sites.
Well, you've got you mentioned the facility, but I want to bring us back to that for just a second, because if you're planning a trip to bourbon country out there, and you've not gone to the Old Forester site in downtown Louisville, you need to do that, because in a very small footprint, it takes you from grain to glass in a matter of an hour, and that's a remarkable. It's a great way to tell the story, but for somebody that doesn't know beans about whiskey, it's a really good way for them to learn and see it from the beginning to the end. So I think that's a huge advantage for Old Forester, and putting that facility in was a stroke of genius.
Yep.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's one of the best stories in all of bourbon, arguably. And funny enough, up until 5 years ago, we never had a place to share that story. So
right. Right. Hey, let's drink some whiskey. How about that?
Yay!
Where do we want to start, Tyler?
Well, what I brought for you guys today is our two of the latest releases in our distillery only series, the 117 series.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, my lighting is pretty bad here. So we have 1910 Extra Old, and then we'll move on to 1910 Extra Old. But these are the Old Forester version of what we do out at Woodford, double oaking, double barreling, and then subsequently the expressions that light the world on fire. We did our release of Woodford Double Double last week.
Right.
I think the email went out at 8 a.m. and by 8:45 we had 1,500 people in line. One of those deals, but it's kind of fun that we didn't necessarily go that route with the 117 series. It's a distillery only release, and we're just putting it out kind of random days, random times, maybe one release. But we're starting to figure out you can't do these giant releases with 2,000 people in line in the middle of downtown Louisville. It just
right.
It's not good for any of the businesses.
You could
so
come out. You could come out and do
trying
them from my house. That would be okay.
Right.
Yeah,
Trying
that'd
to
be all
figure
right.
out ways to make it fair.
Neighbors wouldn't mind a bit.
if you're there at the right day, the right time, we'll put something out, and that seems to be working well for us. But.
Yeah, I remember when when the distillery first opened, and you guys would have releases there, and it would just be lines completely around the building, around the block, and honestly, I would look at that and say that there's just no way.
Yeah.
I don't care how good it is. I'm not doing that anymore.
And it's we want our customers and our fans to be safe. So there's safety issues at play. There's a lot of traffic downtown. It's not fair to the surrounding businesses to block their doorways for 2 or 3 days. So it's an ever evolving challenge, but I mean, it's a great problem to have. We're flattered.
No, it is. It's a testament to you guys and the following you have, but it's also kind of ridiculous at some level too. But I think, the way you're doing the ones where you're putting them out random times, random days, I think that's as good a solution as I think you're going to get. I know for a while you were doing online sales, and hey, it starts at 9 o'clock and 9:01 you're sold out, and it's tough. It's tough.
70,000 people crushed the server. Yeah. But, no, I'm very fortunate to work with the brands I do, in that the stories of double barreling, double oaking, as we call it at Woodford, secondary aging are so closely intertwined, because this is a process that started out in the building at 119 West Main, where we are in downtown Louisville, back in 1910. The building had a fire. We took every barrel we had on hand, rolled them underneath the bottling cisterns, emptied that whiskey back into the barrel, roll them out the back door onto Washington Street. Luckily able to save the bourbon and the building.
Right.
And as the story goes, those barrels sat there an additional 2 years while we focused on getting the day-to-day operations back up and running, repairs of the building and whatnot. And finally, it's 1912, and they're like, "Are those still the barrels from the fire? It's a lot of money. We need to do something." So they vat those barrels together, and just did a limited release, one batch, one time. But in doing so, inadvertently created the first documented case of a bourbon being double oaked or double barreled, whatever you want to call it. Owsley Brown, who was responsible for the expression, didn't come up with that term at the time. He just came up with the term old fine whiskey. But funny enough, that was 1912 when that was released. And then that process of double barreling bourbon goes away for the next 100 years until we bring it back in 2012 with Woodford Double Oaked. And so the two are very closely tied. Then subsequently, 2018, we brought it back with, again, with Old Forester 1910, Old Fine Whiskey. That is why we do not call it double barreled or double oak, because it was called Very Fine Old Whiskey when it was in our building at 119 West Main when it was originally released. And, that found great success. I think we made enough that we thought would last us a year, and we sold out in less than 3 months.
Right. I remember that.
There for that. It was
fun.
Quite frustrating. But the 117 series are just the next evolutions of that expression as you get with like a Woodford double oaked. That was the idea. So standard issue 1910, it's going to age in that second barrel for about 9 months. The 117 series extra old that we have here, this is going to go into barrel. It's not a third barrel. We want to be clear on that. It's just going to spend double the time. This went in 18 months.
Okay.
So if you are a 1910 fan, this is the next evolution, 9 more months in the barrel.
Yep.
Okay. And that's the extra old. I just want to make sure I'm getting that right.
Old.
Extra old is 18 months in the secondary barrel.
And then the next one we'll be tasting is 24 months.
Okay. Gotcha. Well,
Okay.
I want to talk about this because, I mean, just right there on the nose, there's so much more of a confectionery note than I usually pull out on a lot of the Old Forester products. You can kind of tell on the nose, like, oh, that's Brown-Forman yeast.
Right.
That's, that's either a Woodford or an Old Forester. The 1910 is a small departure from that, but this one is so much almost like a beignet or a powdered sugar kind of donut thing on the nose. And then the back end really, it reminds me of a dessert pour. You finish this big heavy meal, maybe that's lamb or, duck or steak or something like that. And you order a port or, maybe some kind of liqueur.
Yeah.
This would be a perfect pairing with something like that. It's great to drink on its own, but it really leans into that confectionery side of the things where the oak is present, but it's subtle and it really kind of dials up the sweetness. I'm a fan.
Yeah. It's almost like there's like preserves or jam, jelly, something like that. on the palate.
Yeah, this one's interesting, and I fully agree with you about the desserts. It's of course, Old Forester tends to have more of that spice backbone to it, and then in 1910 it goes into that second barrel and it immediately grabs all those sugars, in that 9 months. So 1910 looks very big and deep and dark, but it's surprisingly fruity, surprisingly sweet, surprisingly light on its feet. And what's interesting with the double, everybody always thinks that it's just more of a good thing, right? If double oaked is really sweet and confectionery, then double is going to be double that. But it's more of a bell curve, right? This does have a little more serious backbone to it with regard to spice. And yeah, it's very confectionery, but it's balanced by the tannins and the spice, because when you leave it in there 9 more months, now it has time to get that wood interaction. It's going to start drawing out tannins out of that wood, more oxidation. So you get aldehydes developing. So it's kind of interesting, like Woodford double oaked or 117 extra old isn't necessarily a Woodford double oak fan's cup of tea, because it does have tannins and spices.
Right.
It's a more serious bourbon, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting how these evolved, because what we'll see with the extra old is then the curve went back up, and it's just a sweet bomb with darker, richer coffee notes and things like that.
Yeah.
So the extra old, beautiful confections. I think we did a very good job on the balance. This was a Jackie Zykin product, the last one that she worked on before her departure. She's doing amazing, by the way. She's very happy in her current role. So still pick her brain every now and then when I need to. And now we have Melissa Rift, our new master taster, who has been a wonderful addition to the team. So it's been really good onboarding her into the Old Forester legacy and lore, and sharing all our stories with her. So looking forward to seeing what she does down the pipe.
One thing, and I don't think you can necessarily see it on the camera, but man, this thing has thick legs. It's
Absolutely.
I mean, you can just see how that just grabs the glass, and it's just capturing all those oils in it.
And Drew, Kevin, most of your fans are probably familiar with the 1910 second barrel. I don't know if you.
Yeah, I was going to ask, do you mind to speak just a little bit in terms of the difference in the toast and char profiles between the initial barrel that all Old Forester products go to, and then what the barrel profile is like for the secondary barrel?
Yeah, of course. So, our standard barrel, the one thing that sets Brown-Forman barrels, whether it's a Jack, a Woodford, an Old Forester barrel, is the toasting process. We're going to get a very deep toast, deep into the wood, 10 to 15 minutes of indirect radiant heat that is creating that caramel, vanilla, marshmallow, sawdust flavor and aroma deep inside the wood, right? That's That's all wood is. It's sugar. Photosynthesis makes glucose. That is, so when you thaw in the wood, starts to smell all sweet and yummy. So that's what we're after with that toasting process. And then in the end, we just make wood creme brulee, if you want to put it simply. Thin, crispy charred layer of sugar on the surface, but right underneath that charred layer, you have a much deeper toasted layer. Where you're grabbing your caramel, vanilla, coconut, butterscotch, whatnot.
So you're doing a deep toast and a heavy char, is that?
Well, for a standard issue Brown-Forman barrel, yes.
Right.
As far as compared to other barrels that are just charred, let's say, you still get toasting happening underneath that surface, but we're going way deeper.
Right.
Now with something like 1910, we do the opposite. We're going to only give it about half the toasting time, but we're going to give it the deepest char that we can give a barrel. Depending on the season, if it's wintertime, that may push to over a minute. If it's summer, maybe a little less than that. But really, before we start to create ash and before the outer edges of the barrel start to catch on fire, rendering it unusable, we're taking it all the way to where we cannot shoot flame up inside that barrel for another second. So on the second barrel only, it's half the toasting time and then the deepest char that we can give a barrel without compromising the integrity. So, and then Woodford Double Oaked is the opposite. We're going to give that like a 40-minute toasting time. And then this very underwhelming, it's so sad when you see it, just like a 7-second char, just shoot flames up through it, less than a level 1, because it still has to be a charred new barrel, or we couldn't call it bourbon. So the two are really fun to compare because they're polar opposites with regard to toast and char levels.
Right.
So the 1910, this is that same barrel. We're not doing a third barrel, right? 1910 is 9 months. This expression, the extra old that we're drinking, is 18 months. The next one that we'll be drinking is 24 months in that second barrel.
Gotcha. Well, I was going to say, that's just one of the things. Obviously, I'm a little bit of a homer with Old Forester because that was my first, real big boy industry job, right? But taking a grain bill and a yeast strain that are similar essentially across the Brown-Forman product line and have this many different variations on an expression that are on purpose. It's not like, Brown-Forman in general doesn't just say, oh, this one tastes a little off, let's do a whole new brand around it. It's very intentional in from the cooperage to the grain selection to, the amount of aging, the warehouse process with the heat cycling. It's all on purpose, and it's resulted in a really good wide gambit of product expressions for you guys. And I think that's really cool to see how they play out.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And we've gotten pretty lean and mean, we're not using these mash bills and yeast strains to create different brands. We're focusing on how many different personalities of Old Forester and Woodford. And Woodford's a little different with the different mash bills and a wheat whiskey, a rye whiskey, a malt whiskey. But I think we're up to 12 expressions of Old Forester, not to mention all these 117 series, and they all have a personality unto themselves, which is pretty remarkable.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and one of the things that I think Old Forester has done really well over the years, especially since they opened the distillery downtown and the space downtown, is just innovative releases. Because you had, and I'm sure a lot of this was planned out well before the ribbon was cut on the downtown facility, but it just kind of, once that opened, things kind of started rolling out, with 1910 and 1920, the President's Choice,
Rye.
The rye, man. Yeah. See, the rye it's just fantastic. And it's one of the best bargains in whiskey. Now, don't tell anybody that's involved with pricing at Brown-Forman about that. Okay, we'll just keep that between the three of us. but it's fantastic. It's
Mhm.
a really, really good rye, and it's
Yeah.
at a great price for a consumer. But then then you got into the 117 series, and you've done several different variations on a theme with that. So what's next?
We'll talk about it on the next podcast.
So does that mean you don't know, or does that
Wish
mean
I
you
could
can't
tell
say?
you, but I like my job. So, but no, the good news is this will be an ongoing series with Old Forester. You know, as far as it's above my pay grade, but as far as I've heard, no plans to do away with the series. I know we do have further expressions of it planned to release. So they'll all be their own, you know, unique offering. The one I really hope we continue with is the firefighter barrels, which was a great story. They literally saved our building and enabled us to build Old Forester from the fire that happened on Whiskey Row in 2015. So we've done some great partnerships. The release in between the two expressions we're tasting today was the Whiskey Row Fire release, and we got to bring our firefighters back to Old Forester, have a toast,
That's awesome.
get greeted by the mayor, do a tasting, and just once again thank them for everything they did to get us up and on our feet, and really, you know, enable Whiskey Row to rebound the way it has, not just our building, but the whole block.
Yeah,
Sure.
No, I remember that day. I was driving home from work, and I look out across the river. I work in southern Indiana. I look out across the river. I'm like, what is going on downtown? And
it was, and it was amazing how near and dear to their hearts this event was to a lot of these firefighters. I mean, that was 2015. I don't know if I could go back and look up a photo in my phone from 2015, but they had it right there. And some of the, you know, they would go right to it and show us photos of that they took on the scene. And it looked like Hollywood. I mean, it looked like backdraft. Some of these photos that they had. It was a intense scene.
Yeah, no, and you know, you're absolutely right. They did a tremendous job to save everything. And I know it was a setback, but it could have been a much greater setback had they not done their jobs the way that they do their jobs. So let's look at this extra old, and this is the 1910 that has been aged in a secondary barrel for 24 months. Is that correct? Is that what you said?
Correct. So I think we went off on a tangent, or I did at least, which I tend to do. But with the 1910 extra old, I do think it was a great balance between 1910. It still had that fresh green apple. It still had those beautiful confectionery notes that Drew was alluding to. Wasn't overly tannic and spicy. You know, it didn't just change the DNA of 1910 altogether. Now 117 extra old, this one, I mean, an additional 6 months in barrel just did amazing things to it. And what's funny is it went back the other direction. This is soft, smooth, and creamy. It's really bringing forward what you would expect from a deeply charred barrel, which is coffee, chocolate, you know, toasted coconut. All these dark, rich.
I was just gonna say like a chocolate mousse, or like not creme brulee, but not in like the custardy sense in terms of flavor, but in terms of the texture, where you just have very good, you know, crisp sugar notes and kind of that real creaminess.
It's like if you scrape the top off of a creme brulee.
Yes.
Yeah. Absolutely. And then it's got the tannin backbone again, but it's very balanced. It does drink. It's got a little more red wine tone to it, right? It does dry out your mouth.
Yep,
Mhm.
there's some tannins
But
there for sure.
dangerously smooth while it's at it.
Yep. And what are our proof points on these?
We're keeping them the same as the 1910. We're all at 93 proof.
Okay.
So across the
Wow.
board, yeah.
That's still enough to get me in a little bit of trouble if I was sipping on this for an evening.
Right, and then it doesn't look like that big of a bottle, right? You can
No.
get through
That's
Sure.
just a pint, but yeah, you got to remember that's half a bottle.
yeah. No, it's the thing that there are things that can get you, and Drew kind of alluded to it. There are things that can get you in trouble drinking whiskey. One is something that doesn't drink to its proof. So it may be something that's at a 110, 120 proof level, and it feels like it's, 90. And then there are things like this that the proof may not be that high, but when you're tasting it, you're getting something a little different with almost every taste.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where the danger lies in this one.
Yeah, it's I'm not a big proof chaser. If the bourbon's good or the whiskey's good, it's good. But yeah, that's a great point. This, a lot of people, the trend a lot of the time seems to be people want the biggest, boldest, most melt your face off thing they can find these days. But this, I hope, is
hazmat or bust, right?
evidence that 93 proof can be outstanding, as it is with 1910, as it is with 117 extra old, extra old.
Right.
All our Woodford expressions are 90.4. Remember, so
yeah. So I want to ask a question. Well, first of all, Drew, anything else on this extra old, other than it's extra good?
Yeah, it's real tasty, and I might need to go, work some old connections to see if you guys have any sitting in the back somewhere. But no, it's fantastic. I'm very excited to see the future of this series.
Yeah.
And I like that it is a slight departure, and I mean this in the most complimentary way. It's just a little bit different from anything else that you guys have, and so continuing to see flavor evolution and things like that, it's really neat for me as a fan.
Thank you. Yeah.
Right. You're playing on the theme of your mash bill.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And are there differences in anything in the distillation or the fermentation on these different expressions? It's just, let's take it, let's go through the normal process, put it in the barrel, and then
yeah. I mean, with regard to the 1910 series, the only difference is the second barrel.
Yeah.
And the time it's in there. No, all Old Forester is Old Forester with the exception of the rye. That's the only thing that's different. We're only making one juice.
Okay. And just to kind of compare your two lives, okay, whiskey and wine, in terms of both, I'll start here. In terms of tasting with those, what do you see as the biggest differences to you as somebody that's a sommelier and a bourbon steward and working in the industry as you do? What are the differences that you see in the process you go through in tasting a wine versus tasting a whiskey?
That's a great question, and I'm still figuring that out for myself, every day. But I mean, obviously, alcohol content, right? You have to navigate through the alcohol in whiskey, whereas wine, that's not an issue. So it's interesting to me. You would think wine would be a lot easier to navigate, picking out flavors and aromas because you're not having to weave through the alcohol, but also whiskey's a lot more intense, right? Those notes are a lot more pronounced and strong and consolidated, condensed. So it's been interesting. Now, if I have to do tasting notes or something, Glencairns especially, as I was talking with Dixon Dedman about this one time, he's like, these were designed for 80 proof scotch, right? They're not designed for barrel proof, 130 proof bourbon.
Right.
So wine glasses I still use with bourbon, believe it or not. Big, bold Pinot Noir glass.
Yep.
Nose it, let it air, taste it, add 1 drop, 2 drops, 5 drops, 10 drops of water as
right.
Let it go through the motions. So again, luckily, you know, all those tasting practices translate. I do think I'm still pretty unique in the industry, and that all the groups I work with say my tasting is different than anybody else's, because I still use that deductive tasting process that you learn throughout sommelier training, as to, okay, let's focus on fruit. And I kind of focus on 5 categories. You know, in any bourbon, you're going to have cherries, apples, a peach apricot, a tropical, or a citrus, you know. And so if you let it lead you down okay, it's green, but it's not green apple. Maybe it's pear. Maybe it's honeydew or kiwi. You know, just let it speak to you and let it lead you down the path. Same with spices, same with confectionery notes. So that's kind of the approach I use. It's still working for me. So,
Yep.
But as far as the 2 industries, this is like retirement, honestly. I used to carry around 2,000, 3,000 wines in my head that I could speak to at a moment's notice.
Right.
Now I've got 25 SKUs I have to talk about. So it's like, just relief.
Every day's a holiday now. Huh?
I will say it's amazing how quickly all the wine knowledge Angel shares out of your brain when you're not working with it on a daily basis. I still get recommendations like, oh, what wine do you like? And I'm like, I can picture the label. I can't. If it was in front of me, I could be like, that's good, that's good, that's good in a liquor store. But all those producers and names and vintages are just
and it's getting that way in bourbon, but it's all the labels with a single source.
yeah.
You just have to wade through all of that.
What I was talking about earlier, I'm glad we're not branching off, at least, and I don't see Brown-Forman doing that anytime soon, especially, but branching off into, you know, different labels altogether, different brands altogether, with the same mash bills or yeast strains or whatnot.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I enjoy our focusing on fewer SKUs, well done, and all the expressions and personalities therein.
Yeah. Drew, any other thoughts on the extra old?
Oh man, I need to go back to it. Yeah, I was sipping on this one earlier today, and I was just blown away by the overall sweetness. Not to reduce it to one thing, because there is a lot more going on, and if we had a longer show, we could talk about it. But it is just such a nice differentiation. So, you know, we drank 100 proof, you know, orange label, or, you know, all the different names that Old Forester has had kind of over the last couple of years. But this is just such a nice kind of softer departure, like you mentioned earlier, Tyler. It's creamy, it's soft, it's approachable. This would be a good starter whiskey if it was more available, just to say, hey, maybe try this. You don't like bourbon? Oh, are you sure? You only drank Kentucky Gentleman in college?
Proof, sweet as candy. Yeah.
And it's got that nice little caramelly, marshmallowy that sits on your tongue, and then the tannins kind of kick in and say, hey. and it's got that sweetness to it, but it also has that little I don't know, pinch or something in there that is that lets you know, hey, this is serious. This is we're not fooling around here. And
there's a lot going on in this class.
It's not, hey, we're serious because this is a really high proof, but we're serious in that, look at what we did in terms of aging this whiskey. And I think that can easily get lost on somebody that just is guzzling down the sweetness of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, outstanding. Drew, any other questions on the whiskey side before we start talking about a little bit of music?
I don't think so. I know Tyler pretty well, but I would just say if you get a chance to go take one of his tours or take a class with him, ask your questions because I guarantee you he knows the answers. And if you want to talk tasting coffee, if you want to talk food, this is the guy. He makes the best duck confit I've ever had in my life.
Wow, you remember? I did. I made roasted duck. Yeah.
Yeah, it was really good. And I think we took shots out of the frozen Jägermeister machine in your apartment at the time. So we were making some bad choices and some good choices that night.
Right.
Yeah. I've got some ideas that we'll talk with Tyler about after the show. How about that? But as we're wrapping up side A and talking about some of this wonderful whiskey that Tyler's been kind enough to share with us, we're going to get to side B in just a second. Before we do, Drew, I want you to talk about what's going on with you music-wise and share everybody what that is.
Yeah, so we've got a good list of exciting shows coming up in March. We are gearing up. We've kind of been slow in the months of January and February, but we've got another project coming out, and we're going to start promoting it pretty hard. So March the 3rd, pardon me. We're going to be at Frankfurt Avenue Liquors. It's a great little shop here in town. They do great cocktails and some vintage pours and things like that. We're kind of calling that our MTV Unplugged show. So we're going to see if we can do our regular set list on all acoustic instruments. It's going to be very fun. March the 17th, we're going to be with our friends right next door to Old Forester at O'Shea's downtown. That's going to be the St. Patrick's Day show. So the boys and I will be out probably wearing green tuxedos and making poor decisions. Looking forward to that. And then, if you listen to our Turntable Roundtable show last week, talked a lot about collaboration and some things that we're doing for that. So March the 24th and 25th, we're going to be back at the Highlands location for O'Shea's. We've got two different fantastic local bands coming to open for us. So on March the 24th, that'll be the Adrian Taylor Band. He's a great country singer-songwriter in town. And I think he's going to be bringing some of his guys to play and open up the show with us. And then on the 25th, we've got our friends Tangled Minds coming to open for us. They've got a new record out to promote, and they've got some exciting stuff coming up as well. So give them a little plug. But if you're into, singer-songwriter music, if you're into the rock and the folk stuff too, there's going to be something for you. So if you're in town or near town, come see one of those shows, and we'll have a good time.
Yep. Very good. Drew, congratulations. All that stuff is coming your way, and well-deserved. Well-deserved.
Appreciate it.
Maybe we could get some live music there at the Old Forester. That
I know, right?
Not to put Tyler on the spot. Not to put Tyler on the spot or anything.
It would be amazing to do a lot of things. If we didn't have a tall, skinny building that is just one direction. It's swear we could already build that building again and start over. Just with the influx of tourism that we've seen in the last 5 years.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little music. And Tyler, one of the questions that we ask all the guests we have on our show is, do you remember your first concert?
Yeah, I mean, my first concert, I'm trying to think. It was a whirlwind of about 2 weeks because I grew up in Southwest Houston, Sugar Land, Texas. Mm-hmm. And fortunately, the company my father worked for was like the main sponsor of the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo. Okay. So I was a little late to the game with concerts, but starting probably sophomore year, for 2 weeks, I was the most popular kid in school because I had like 15 tickets to each and every concert. There was a concert, a different like major country artist every night for 2 weeks straight. And I mean, this was back in the 90s, right? Early 90s. I'm old. but some of the greats, Johnny Cash, Hank Williams Jr. Was a big one. Garth Brooks was there. Reba McEntire.
Wow.
Just anybody and everybody. First, I think those were my first concerts. The first one actually buying tickets to and just going with friends, I believe was Jimmy Buffett Banana Wind Tour back in like 97.
Well, that's not as exciting to me as Hank and Garth and Reba, but
Clay Walker, Diamond Rio. I mean, all of these just iconic like 90s country bands that it's amazing that I got to go see so many of them. And this was over the span of like 3 years, that 2-week period, which Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo is the biggest rodeo in the world. It's an experience. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. What about your first album? Do you remember the first album that you bought?
Like I said, well, Kevin understands, Drew does not, but this would have been back on cassette tape.
Yeah.
I remember giving my babysitter money to go get me Metallica Master of Puppets when I was in like 6th grade. Then my mom found it and read the lyrics and took it away.
As moms do, yes.
You know what? I think before that it was Michael Jackson Thriller. I think that was my first. I think that was my first album.
Yeah, that's not too shabby itself, right? That's there.
Pretty good little lineup you got there, buddy.
Yeah, I remember my buddy and I in his basement and in my room playing Michael Jackson Thriller, that album, just over and over again. Probably would have been like 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade, somewhere in there.
Yeah. Yeah. So we've covered a lot of ground in like 5 minutes of talking about music. We've gone from Bocephus to Parrot Heads to Metallica to Michael.
That's what my Spotify looks like. I am equal opportunity, man. I listen to anything from you'll find Ray Charles to Johnny Cash to Metallica to Eminem to whatever, if I like it, I like it. I don't really stick to genres or.
So, what here in town, do you go to try to see live music when you can, or how does that work for you?
I do. I mean, obviously, I've been trying to get together with Drew for the last 2 years. COVID hit and everything, and we're kind of homebodies. I love to cook, so 4 or 5 nights out of the week, relaxation for me is coming home and playing around in the kitchen for 2 or 3 hours. And cooking a great meal. So it's kind of hard to get me out and about. I want to say I've kind of been going back to my roots. I went to Ryan Bingham at the Paris Town Hall, Old Forester Paris Town Hall, a few years ago. That may have been my last concert, man. Need to get out and see Drew play, obviously. Would love to. And it's amazing. You can't get me from the Old Forester door to the O'Shea's door.
We're going to try this time. We're
going to kidnap you.
Over, I'm just gone.
We're going to kidnap you and take you there. So,
Now, what was the Ryan Bingham show before or after Yellowstone got big?
I want to say it was before. It was pre-COVID.
Yeah.
Okay. I know he's gotten a lot of popularity from that show. Not that he's not deserving of it.
It was a small show. Not a lot of people even knew who he was back then. But he blew up when he, I think, won a Grammy or an Oscar, and then Yellowstone. He's gotten huge.
Yeah. So when you were, say, a senior in high school, do you remember what was popular then, or what you were listening to a lot then?
Senior in high school. That was, God, what was it? Well, no, live was more like freshman, sophomore year. That's kind of the soundtrack to my freshman year, I believe. Third Eye Blind was huge senior year.
Yeah.
What else? If I have my Spotify on, I've got a lot of those nostalgic songs, on there. Trying to remember what was going on.
Well, let me ask you this, okay? Because you're driving from Old Forester to Woodford and everything all the time. If Drew and I piled in the car with you, snuck in and found a couple of stray 117 barrels back there, what would we be listening to with you as you drove?
Man, I've been kind of going back to my roots lately. A lot of that Texas rock, Americana. I grew up with Robert Elkeen, Pat Green, folks like that. Some of the more modern versions of that, like the Ryan Binghams, Kip Moore, artists like that. But again, most of the time, my Spotify is on shuffle. So the last song I remember just jamming out to, going way too fast on I-64 back to Louisville was I think Akon, Nah Nah Nah, and oh god, Nelly. Yeah, I was bumping out to some of those on my last trip back from Woodford, which is just last week. So that's pretty fresh in the mind.
That's good.
Excellent.
That's good stuff. Is there, if you're thinking about the differences between whiskey and wine, are there certain styles of music or certain artists you think, okay, this is something that's more suited to drinking whiskey to, and this is something that's more suited to drinking wine to?
That's a great question. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of fun. Obviously, kind of going back to my roots, what I was speaking to, country music, Americana, Texas rock, that is damn good whiskey drinking music right there.
Yep.
Yes.
Wine. It's funny. I used to always equate wines to musical artists. Kind of do the same thing with whiskeys. Something like this, the 117 series, or even an Old Forester 1910, 1870. The different personalities. Something real smooth, easy drinking, but classic. Maybe that's Tom Petty. Laid back, free spirit, just no cares in the world. Whereas something like 1897 or a bigger, bolder bourbon or wine, maybe that's more like a Johnny Cash or a Pink, badass rocker chick with attitude, 1910 to me is Michael Jackson, right? Back in 1910, it was well ahead of its time. It changed the game completely.
Right.
Right. And we still look back on it today. It's still as influential today, if not more, with all these double oaked, double barreled expressions coming out than it was when we originally accidentally did it. So yeah, I think just kind of what the personality of the wine or the bourbon is, kind of tells you what music to listen to. The big, bold, expansive spice bombs, bourbons. I've equated those to something like Queen, specifically something like, We Will Rock You into We Are the Champions, just this banging intro.
Right.
And then a long symphonic finish, things like that. That's kind of how I do think about music a lot when I'm assessing bourbons, profiles, and personalities, or wines.
Yeah.
So,
no, I think that could be a thing where you're doing tasting notes and you're saying, think of, you know, Queen's Night at the Opera album, okay, or something along those lines. But because I think that I've done a couple little projects with our friend Alan Bishop, and it's kind of been, okay, here's some music. What does this taste like? And kind of play around and say, okay, what is that? What do we end up with? And it's you take one playlist to another playlist to another album, and you come up with something different. And I don't want to make it out for more than what it really is, but I think there's an element of truth to that.
Yeah, and it's a great way to, include more people in the conversation, I think, as well. If you don't have the greatest palate on earth, or you're new to bourbon, and you can't pick out 20 different adjectives for what you're smelling and tasting.
Right.
Well, you can say, okay, this bourbon is soft, smooth, and elegant, whether it's a musician or Gwyneth Paltrow is different than Robert De Niro, they have these different personalities to them. And it's a great way to add an analogy and include other people into the conversation, an easy way. And, you can smell two bourbons and be like, okay, yeah, soft, smooth, easy listening. That's Lionel Richie. And
yes,
this is Hank Williams,
Yep.
Big, bold, rough around the edges, masculine Johnny Cash. So it is, I think they're great analogies. Musicians, albums, celebrities, whatever, that can draw more people into the conversation, make it a little more approachable and understandable.
Yeah. As we've talked through this a little bit, and I'm thinking, okay, what would be a group or an artist that would be a parallel to Old Forester? And what I've come up with, just in 5 minutes of thinking about it, was the Red Hot Chili Peppers. And because it doesn't matter what the Chili Peppers song is, you know who it is. But that they can take you a lot of different places, a lot of different things, present their music in a variety of ways. It may be something that's smooth and kind of jazzy. It may be something that's very powerful and rock heavy. Or it may be something that's a little softer, a little bit more on the easy listening side. Not necessarily easy listening, but you know what I mean. But it's all out of the same place. And Old Forester, all out of the same mash bill, all out of the same process, but you're getting a whole different tasting profile based on what you do with it from there.
Yeah, I love that thought and analogy. Absolutely. Red Hot Chili Peppers. It also has the spice in the name, right?
Right.
Of course, you're always going to have a little spice.
Right.
Spice is
definitely.
All right. Well, this has been a lot of fun. And like I said, I've got a couple of ideas we'll run past you post show. But this has been a lot of fun, Tyler, getting to know you and know more about you. Clearly, very, very talented guy and a great asset to Old Forester and Brown-Forman, and a lot of fun music stuff there too. So we just need to get you out to see Drew, and we'll
That's
capture.
On me.
We'll make it easy on you. We'll just wait till you get off work one day, and we'll kidnap you, and we'll take you down the road.
Just pull up in a van and
yeah.
Just walk next door, buddy. It's all right.
I won't press charges. I'll have fun.
Oh man. All right. Well, before we get out of here, Drew, tell everybody what we've got coming up next week.
Yeah, next week, making his second return to the show, well, first return, second appearance on the show is our friend Chris Tapp of the Cold Stairs. So he's going to be talking about some of their new music. I'm sure we'll get into some good whiskey topics as well. And then just keep your eye out. There's a new record coming from those guys too. Sure to be fantastic.
March 10th.
Yes.
And this will air well in advance of that. But if you're in Nashville area, March 10th, they're doing a show at the Basement, and Dirty Streets is actually opening for them then. But you'll see the Cold Stairs there. Then they're doing a show back in their hometown of Evansville at the Polka Lounge on March 11th. So be sure to check those guys out. So as we're wrapping up, let's talk about where folks can be found on social media. Tyler, where can people find you and Old Forester?
I mean, you can try. I'm not a big social media guy either. I'll jump on Facebook once every 3 months. Honestly, I'm horrible. I do have an Instagram handle at Tyler Mirt, so I'll respond to some of those eventually.
If you have questions for Tyler, just send them to Drew or myself, and we'll be sure to pass them along.
We'll forward them.
Yeah, I may have to hire y'all as agents or something to bring me into the modern. Yeah, I'm horrible at social media, but I got a unique name. I know that there's no other Tyler Mirts floating around out there, so pretty easily findable on Facebook or Instagram.
Yeah. All right, Drew, how about you?
Yep, you can find me on Twitter at DrewCrawley63, being an asshole most of the time, just in general. And then on Instagram at Drew.Crawley63. That's where I post a lot of music. Also have started a Facebook page, Drew Crawley Music. I'm going to be sharing a lot of the dates and events kind of things where you can follow along in that. I'll share those on my personal as well. But if you're interested in coming out to seeing one of the shows with, solo or with the band or whatever you're interested in, that'll be a good way to find those as well.
Yep. Be sure to check that out. And we'll obviously post whatever he's got going on the Bourbon Turntable stuff. So if you want to find it on the Bourbon Turntable, you want to watch our show, go to YouTube, subscribe there. And you can see these lovely people that we have as our guests. If you just want to listen, you can go to your favorite podcast platform, as long as it's Apple, Spotify, or Google. We also have a Facebook page. That's where we post all of our shows. We have a Facebook group where we encourage people to post what you're drinking, what you're listening to, and how the two go together. Kind of like what we talked about tonight. And you may be drinking something that people haven't tried before. That could bring some interest. You may be listening to some music that is new. We post a lot of new music stuff on there too. Mm-hmm. Every Friday I try to post a 4 for Friday. It is new music that is out that I find interesting. You may or may not, but it's 4 songs. I think you can probably spare that in your drive home on Friday evening after work. So on behalf of Drew and Tyler, first of all, Tyler, thank you again for being on the show.
Yes, thank you.
Wonderful. My pleasure, guys. Thank you for having me.
Look forward to connecting with you more in the future. But on behalf of Drew, Tyler, and myself, until next time, thank you for watching. Cheers, love, and Freebird.
Cheers.
Night, everybody.